It was like 2012. I was on a bus and a racist incident took place, and I filmed it, and it went viral all over the world. It went insanely big. I didn't realize the thing would be this powerful. You've set off a chain reaction that you don't have control over anymore. And I think it was the lack of control that was like, oh shit, what is this thing? We called it Dog Park. It was a study where the premise of the study was a woman who would go and sit down in dog parks. She would go up to the dogs, figure out what gender they were by scrutinizing their genitalia, then speaking to the owners of the dogs to figure out their sexual orientation. And she's got this giant spreadsheet about how people behaved when dogs humped. It's a really kind of heartbreaking time to live in, because we're so fragmented. There's a lack of freedom. Very strange time.
It is a very strange time. Kind of had ordinary discourse for decades, and suddenly find that I'm in some sort of Soviet regime that is kind of masked with smiles, and it's not happening, but it is.
Woke is on its way out, and I feel perhaps something a little bit scary might be on the rise.
So, Mike Nayna, we're delighted to have you. I've been following your work for some time, and I'd love if you could give our viewers and our listeners just a kind of an introduction to where you've come from. How did you come to be somebody who's kind of in the center of what feels to me like the zeitgeist of an awful lot of truths have been censored and obscured, and they now need a light shone on them. And you seem to be part of the filmmakers that are shining a light. So where did it begin? Because from what I know of you is it began with a viral YouTube. You happened to be on a bus.
Yeah. Before we hit record, it's really difficult for me to create a coherent origin story, because I'm just sniffing around and following my gut into all sorts of different places. And before we hit record, we were trying to figure out how do you describe me, and how did you describe me? A Forrest Gump-like figure, did you say? I'm sorry, you've...
Am I frozen? Forrest Gump, not because of his renowned stupidity, but because he happened to be in very important places at very important times in life.
I wasn't sure if that was an insult or just dumb luck that I end up in all these weird places, but I thought that was funny. Anyway, so the viral bus incident. So I've always been into media communications and filmmaking, and have a background in news. I worked in a newsroom for a long time. And when was it? It was like 2012. It was a long time ago now. I was on a bus and a racist incident took place, and I filmed it, and then I turned it into a bit of a video for YouTube, and it went viral all over the world. And then and I guess at the time it went viral because what I filmed was very shocking, but it went extra viral because the news got involved and they were interested in this new viral thing. At the time, the word viral wasn't actually in the public lexicon. It was just this new, oh my God, there are these crazy videos that are just going viral all over the place. What is this phenomenon? And so it blew up twofold. And I later on made a film about that for the ABC here in Australia. And it was just about my experience through it. And then the media storm that took place, being in the middle of this viral incident, and just how the way that the people made on the outside made sense of the event was a very strange experience for me. And so I wanted to try and share that experience in a film. And so how did I get on the Bubba Gump?
Before that, I remember reading, John Ronson's book, Now You've Been Publicly Shamed. And he wrote that in 2013. And, in fairness, it's a brilliant book. And he talks about the complexities that arise when somebody is shamed, but also when somebody shames somebody. And I gathered that you kind of had mixed feelings. Like, first of all, the two guys on the bus were racists and awful, as far as I could gather. But then
Yeah,
the
yeah.
mob certainly came
One
for
guy was
them,
racist, but
and
yeah.
was one guy, sorry, yeah. But it certainly felt like the mob came from them, and it felt like you had mixed emotions about the whole madness.
Yeah, because before that, I had a viral video. I had this marketing job, and we were playing with viral marketing, and so I had a bit of an idea about how it works technically. So, and having a news background, it was like I did it on purpose. I knew I shot this thing. I knew it had some kind of viral energy, and then my friend Mark and I, who produces a lot of the stuff I do, we put it in the laps of a lot of journalists, and had a lot of like sock puppet accounts, and said, "Oh, what's going on here?" and then got the engine going. And then it exploded into a very, very big thing. And the internet was a lot more free flowing and organic back then. Now everyone's doing all that creepy shit that Mark and I were doing. Governments are doing it, and they weren't doing that at the time. But how do I explain it? Yeah, it could, because I set out to I don't know, seek revenge on these people who were being awful on a bus. They were yelling at me and several other people, and being really racist and threatening us with knives and stuff like that. And so I made the video, and we tried to make it go viral in order to get revenge on these people. And then it went insanely big. And it was like, how do I explain the feeling? It's just like, I didn't realize the thing would be this powerful. It's like, and how many people were talking about it, and how much bullshit was being spoken around it, and all the chattering and 7 p.m. Project news stories and all that sort of thing. And you're like, you feel like you've set off a chain reaction that you don't have control over anymore. And I think it was the lack of control that was like, oh shit, what is this thing that we have now, and the power that we have with the internet. And so definitely had mixed feelings about it. It wasn't, I guess I still don't really know where I stand on it. It was a strange experience.
You see, I knew nothing about that. This is really interesting. I knew nothing about that whole incident. And so this is, because I've always wondered how you ended up filming the Grievance Studies. Like, so this shot you to fame, this viral incident, and then from there you somehow ended up...
like it was, a lot of attention, but I was able to make a film for ABC for that. So I had a bit of standing. And then how did I leverage that into... I don't feel like they're that connected. It was just, I was looking for another film. And around after that, so it's like, viral media is becoming a thing. Citizen journalism is becoming a thing, which was a theme in the first film. And so then we get to maybe 2014, 15, the internet's maturing a bit. And this is where you get the Great Awakening. So the Great Awakening was already starting in 2012, which, because I filmed a racist incident, it was in the zeitgeist. And so that's why I knew it would be viral, because you just poke and prod at journalists who are just looking for racism. It's like there's a big market for racism. And so the Great Awakening starting to happen. I'm figuring in the film industry, trying to get funds for films, and also working in the news, and the bulletins getting more and more about gender issues and race, and it's coming from every angle. And I think the internet had a big part in that. But my experience of it was, I just wanted to make films, and I realized that I had to become an employee of a worldview in order to be able to make films. And so I can't make films about anything. I may as well make it about this thing that I had. Like, what is this? And so I kept on coming in contact with this lexicon, worldview, gender, race, sex issues. And so I followed it upstream. I started hanging out with protesters and speaking to a lot of people about what the hell this was, because it's a strange language and a way of thinking that I didn't quite understand at the time. And I wanted to understand, because I was like, is there anything here? Is this an extension of the civil rights movement? What the hell is this thing? And they all seem to have, not all of them, but most of them had read the same books and studied in certain cultural, had been in cultural studies, and even in university. I studied media, and you come into contact with it, right? Like with a course or something. Everyone knows Michel Foucault, and why do we all know that? Yeah. And so I started sitting in on gender studies lectures, and in Australia it's the Aboriginal issue. So a lot of these kind of post-colonial things, which I didn't know at the time. I was just going in the heart of what the hell. Like I was just following this ideology upstream, and I ended up in the universities and ended up speaking to professors, and they were very standoffish. The professors. It was I mean, it's a bit strange, a kind of, 6-foot bald man going into a gender studies class, but so it's fair enough that they were a bit weird, but usually a professor is excited to talk about what they study. But it was very, they didn't like the questions I was asking, and trying to get to the bottom of it. And so I sought a second opinion, and the second opinion was the people outside of the cultural studies disciplines. And I had a very strange experience with someone who studied aspects of Western civilization. I sent him an email, and then he sent me an email from another account off his university account into this like back and forth about what the hell I was looking at. And he seemed very, very passionate about it. And he was like, oh, like it was as though he was, how do you explain it? Like, I don't know. It's like someone who's been kidnapped or something like that. And they're like, oh, they can't see,
Yeah.
I'm in the basement. Help me.
Well,
and
I live in the trans world where there's an awful lot of that. There's like a multitude. You might even have a spreadsheet of different people's names and a range of email addresses and all sorts of things like that.
So yeah,
it's common in my world.
You stumble into this. I called it an intellectual underground, or an academic underground. And so I went to meet him, and I met him in his office, and he took me down the street to a cafe because he didn't want people overhearing him in his office. And I thought, this is it. This is where the film is. There's something very, very strange and big going on here. If this guy doesn't feel comfortable speaking his mind, he's an academic. You actually should be wanting to tussle with people about your opinions. And he was scared, but also very passionate as well. Like he would really like vent about what the hell was taking place within the universities. And so through this intellectual underground, I started networking, and eventually met Pete, who had a very secret project, like a kind of hoax project that he was undergoing, which later became the Grievance Studies Affair. So he started that as we were networking, having a conversation.
If you could just tell people what the Grievance Studies are, if you don't mind, just so people know what they are, and they can take.
Yeah. So the Grievance Studies Affair was it was a hoax project that was the Helen Pluckrose, James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, and myself we underwent this. How would you explain? It's like a hoax. It was a hoax project. So these grievance studies, these cultural studies departments, which I mentioned earlier, they have a strange form. It's an ideology, and their journals and their disciplines are just ideological generation mills. And so they've got and so Peter, Helen, and Jim decided to hoax their highest ranking journals. So write nonsense and make sure it fits the ideology of these cultural studies departments, and then submit them to their highest ranking journals and see if they can get them published. And this would discredit the whole grievance studies industry, which is quite prominent within most universities, if not dominant. And so through the process, there was a bit of trial and error to the start, but once we kind of understood and figured out the ideology, Helen, Peter, and Jim were able to write the most absurd papers you could ever imagine and get them published at the highest rated journals within these disciplines. And so in the end, there were 7 published, but also 7 more that were in the process of being published. At one point, we got busted. The Wall Street Journal found one of these papers and discovered there was a fake name attached to it. Well, the paper was so crazy that it did get published because the people within the disciplines didn't quite see how ridiculous it was because they're so ideologically deranged. But as soon as it got to the outside world, then it generated a lot of attention. And a journalist at the Wall Street Journal picked this up and went, this can't be real. And so she did her own investigation and ended up speaking to James, who she thought was a scholar named Helen. And
And could
yeah,
we just
and then
give a few examples,
Yeah,
if you
well,
don't mind? Like,
what's
for
that
example, I know.
one?
that one was what was it? It was we called it Dog Park. It was a study where the premise of the study was a woman who would go and sit down in dog parks and then monitor the behavior. She was a sociologist and mark down when her data was when dog humping incidents would take place. And then she would go up to the dogs, monitor, figure out what gender they were by scrutinizing their genitalia, then speaking to the owners of the dogs to figure out their sexual orientation, and she's got this giant spreadsheet about how people behaved when dogs humped. And if there was a homosexual dog humping, they would behave in a certain way. If there was a heterosexual dog humping, they would behave in another way. And the lens that this theoretical academician was looking at it through was black feminist criminology. And so,
Of course.
of course,
And
it's just garbled.
Wasn't there Mein Kampf was kind of rewritten through feminist ideology?
Yeah. So Pete was very keen on this one, and it was good because the goal of the project was to make it salacious and crazy and funny, and so it would go viral, and then we would be able to expose what the hell was going on within these disciplines. And so Peter wanted to translate, I think it was chapter 11 of Mein Kampf, and instead of being against the Jewish people, it was intersectional feminists against the white race. And so just with a bit of tweaking, there's a fair bit of tweaking in there, I must admit, but with a bit of tweaking, the essence of Mein Kampf was published within a feminist journal, reasonably high-ranking feminist journal.
Yeah, we live in, Stella and I live in the world of gender, and of course, this exposed that the peer review system is very much broken, and I've always wanted someone to do the equivalent. That I come across papers in the world of gender research and wonder if Peter and James are behind them because they're so completely absurd.
Yeah.
But I'd love for someone to do it. Although I guess we know peer review is broken, so we don't really need to prove it at this point.
Well, the queer theory stuff was right in there. So there was trans, cultural studies journals that were to do with gender, and so
what I mean though, I would like someone to do, like, we've got research, so-called research on the medical side of it that's just completely absurd. It's like, how did this is just nonsense. I'd love for somebody to just spoof that, but I guess it'd be a bit harder.
Well, I don't think it would be. Like, I don't. When we went into this Grievance Studies hoax project, I didn't think that it was possible. You get this sense that these academicians are studying real things, and a PhD is a meaningful title, and they know what they're talking about. And I know that the cultural studies departments are absolutely crazy, but I don't think if you're doing activist scholarship, I think you can get away with a lot. I don't think these people are worthy of a PhD. It's very, as long as it's ideologically sound, it gets through. And this is true in humanitarian health. All kinds of health it's gone into. It's a kind of knowledge activism. I can tell you how it works, and it doesn't just work like this in the university. It works in everything. So let's take critical dietetics as an example. So there's a journal called Critical Dietetics, and dietetics is a scientific study of diet and nutrition. What happens is an activist who is adept at critical theory, which is modern Marxism, a kind of looking at power dynamics between people, and it really is. Its lineage comes from Marxism. So a person who's adept at critical theory, or within one of these critical theory, post-colonial queer theory, or critical race theory. There's a couple of other minor ones there. They will go to the field of dietetics, and then they will establish themselves within the sociology of dietetics. And what I mean by that is they will start looking at the people who study dietetics. And then they'll do things like write papers on the gender makeup. How many men are in the field of dietetics? How are women oppressed in this? How are black people oppressed in this? Oh, this is all white people in this. And so academicians are quite cowardly and sheepish. And so they just like, oh, you're supposed to be looking at diet, not me. And so they just let these people do whatever they want. Meanwhile, you've got these frozen academicians who aren't pushing back on these people because they're studying the sociology of the thing. And as they're frozen, they go and study the field itself. So they create their own journal because there's a dietetics as a discipline. Now there's critical dietetics. This is the kind of bizarro world critical theory version of it. And they started by studying the people, and now they're studying the thing. And so in the critical dietetics, it studies how would you explain it? How the way we think about food is oppressing fat people. How white people making cornbread is racist. How these are just like discourses, scientific discourses that are oppressing people. And so they go in there with this equity mindset, and they totally, I think, destroy the field of dietetics. But meanwhile, they're drawing research. They're drawing resources. They're like a cancer. It's like a cancer cell next to a normal cell, and drawing resources from it. And so they get all the money. They get invited to the dietetics conferences. They get PhDs, and they are this bizarro world version. This isn't just happening in dietetics. It's happening to gender medicine. It's happening to any field of study. Like you can if you're adept at critical theory, you can just go into a field of study, study its sociology, then study its thing, and then you've got a bizarro world version of this. And I think most of the universities flipped. It's more of an ideological church than delivering facts to the world at this point. And so they've flipped huge amount. Humanities and social science totally flipped. And obviously, this is how they've gotten into your world. And psychology, this is your field you've studied. That's been gone for a long time.
Totally.
And so
that really started it. Psychology fell a long time ago, as far as I can see. But I do think that you're highlighting such an important point, which is it becomes self-perpetuating, because then any young upcoming academic sees where the excitement is and sees where the funding is, and so then they go to it, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's how we've kind of ended up in the mess we're in, because that's where the funding is, because it's all based on go on.
Sorry, there's a bit of a lag here, but it's easier, and that's the other thing. It's like the easy path. it's like a jobs program for simpletons, and they go into these things, and it's like, I'm a dietitian. It's like, are you? You're a critical dietitian. Yeah. But I'm still getting invited to all the conferences, and I'm still getting all the resources, and I still have a job. And really, I just have to go sit at my desk and criticize people all day and criticize their work, and not actually do the work itself. This is what happened in the film industry, but it was happening alongside what was happening at the university was happening in the film industry. In Australia, we go to it's not a very big market in Australia, and so it's very government focused. And so you've got these management layers where you've got something like Screen Australia, who we all apply for grants for, and then you can make films. And you've got these they often come from NGOs or the university. They're adept in this critical analysis. And then they've gone in and, particularly by an NGO in this case, the Gina Davis Institute for Women in Media was a big one. So they're studying they do things like study how many words are spoken by men and women. And these people are working with Google and creating AI things to figure out how many words a man gets, how many women. They call it a diversity quotient. And they've got like AI tools, and Google's helping them do this. But anyway, there's in Australia, how that's affected us is there's all these studies come out about the gender and sex makeup of the industry. And so then they start giving their funding to more females. It's like more females, more diverse, Black people, more Aboriginals, so on and so forth. I think that's lame as hell, but maybe it would be okay if these people were given their funding to create authentic art, but they're not. They're giving it to the critical filmmakers.
Yeah.
And so you've got this kind of like, what is it? It's like a patronage network that's building through this ideological mindset. And this is a giant propaganda machine. So what we have is funding going towards, if you think about how many films, films got a bit weird in the 2010s. You're like, hang on a sec, why is this person preaching at me? It's because these people are propped up. And so that's happening in critical dietetics, it's happening in psychology, it's happening in the arts, it's happening in journalism, it's happening everywhere. So they've constructed this kind of Soviet propaganda machine throughout the 2010s.
And we saw it in Technicolor, and you were there, as you're always there, at the right place at the right time, with James Damore and Google. Life is like a book.
Life is like a box of chocolate. I'm not a smart man, but I know where the action is.
You were there, seriously. You were there for that James Damore, which I thought was a kind of a shot across. It was kind of like an event when James Damore lost his job and his reputation in Google for something that I hadn't entered the wars at that stage. And it was a mad story. Could you give a little bit of a insight into that?
So how I made something about James Damore was I was involved in the Grievance Studies Affair, and that wasn't public yet. And so I was in Portland trying to figure out what the hell was going on, living in Pete's basement and filming him, and focused on that. And then Pete, actually, Andy No. Do you know Andy No? It is interesting Andy. How all these things connect together. He went to Portland State University, and he was part of a free speech student group, and they created an event to invite James Damore in, and then Peter Boghossian and Helen Pluckrose and my friend Heather Hying, who's a biologist, who wasn't a friend then but has become a friend since. She was on stage. They were on stage talking to James Damore, who had just been fired from Google. So if you don't know the James Damore story, he was experiencing the Great Awakening within Google. And he was getting confronted with all this equity stuff, and he's like, I don't want to say autistic, but he's like Aspie kind of guy, and he's very technical. And so he unbeknownst to himself, he got into a lot of trouble, but he didn't really thought of it that way. He thought, oh, well, if we want to create equal gender parity within Google, we have to do these kinds of things. And he just assumed that people would understand that, at scale, men and women are different. Things that we've known for hundreds of years, and science, like scientifically documented understanding of how things work at scale sociologically. He created a memo saying, well, I don't believe in this ideological version, but if we want to make Google more appealing for more women, then perhaps we can do this. And he put that on the Google message board. And he put it up there as a hypothesis, saying, hey, this is what I think about this stuff. I didn't really like this kind of gender equity meeting we went to. What do you guys think about this approach? Because he was looking at it technically. He's a problem solver. And then it blew up. The memo leaked, went very viral, and he was fired. He was threatened from colleagues and fired from his job. And you've got this kind of poor kind of computer programmer trying to do the best thing, and he was just out on his ass after that. And that became a really big story because it was a very interesting, because there was nothing wrong with his memo. I remember when that happened and reading his memo, I was like, I can't actually see the spot why people are angry. This is just
and what year was it? What year was his memo?
I can't quite remember.
2017, 2018.
Was it? 2017.
2017
right.
was when he wrote it. Yeah.
Because we interviewed
and then it came out later, I think.
We interviewed Grinda Vogel, and he made a great point about, so James Damore would have been in that time when you were forbidden from acknowledging that men and women are different. And then with gender, it's suddenly the whole gender ideology movement came along, and the difference is very important. Men and women are very different because they have to be, because that's how some men can be women, because they have the woman brain, so he would have been caught on the cusp. Right?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm trying to remember back to the abuse that was leveled at him, but I think it was mainly just this chauvinist guy.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't think it had as much to do with the trans
I read
thing.
No, he would have been pre the trans.
It was pre-trans thing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was basically saying men and women are different, he was very intelligent about it, and he was, outlining the reasons how they're different, and women are better in the humanities and cultural sections and things. And if we want to entice them into technology, these are the things, very in earnest. Like you say, there's no wrong, there's no clangor.
He was trying to help.
No.
He really tried to help.
And in normal land, he would have been very helpful, and if they wanted to bring more women in, it would have been helpful. But they hopped on him because of a weird, ivory-towered internet kind of mentality that had taken over. A lot of people like me weren't quite aware that it had taken over. And that was one of the first, life is getting weird, when I read that article. Or it was a kind of a weird sensation of, Jesus, everything's kind of changing. But you've kind of an extraordinary ability, to be at the right place at the right time. You seem to have co-founded basically the origins of Substack, which is, I believe, one of the most important pushbacks that we have, which is a kind of, how would I say it? It's like indie music in the 80s, because the music had been taken over by computerized, awful money-making machines. And so the music was awful. And then indie music, independent music came up, and it took its own.
That's
it
a
made
cool
its
way to
own
look
place,
at it. I like that.
I truly believe this is the equivalent for journalism with Substack, because the journalists have been disaffected. They're out of the corporate machine. The journalists that are remaining in the mainstream are regime journalists who are just propping up the propaganda, and they really aren't interested in delving into the obvious important issues of the day, and instead they're staying very safe. And
they're employees of the ideology.
Regime journalists.
Yes, regime journalists. Yeah. No, I wouldn't say I created. So Substack was its own entity, but we were kicking
Yeah.
around. So Clyde Rathbone, Dane Rathbone, um, uh, yeah, and a couple other guys. We were kicking around in a similar realm. Um, and then that company, it was called Letter. And so Letter was, we thought of it as a kind of long form Twitter. So, and the way sometimes you make these things and then you let people play with them and then they become something other than what you thought. But we went through a few iterations of different social media platforms. And one of the ones that I guess was the most successful was a platform that where people would engage in dialogues, and so you would have we had all these really awesome writers coming in together, and then having letter exchanges between, like, old style letter exchanges, and so
Yeah.
instead of this kind of how would you say, like a kind of rhetoric piece out to the world, there were dialectics between two people, and then they would try and figure out the truth between themselves. And the
Um,
guys down at Substack really, really liked this, and then they acquired that company. And Dane and Clyde work, who I co-founded it with. They're at Substack now, and they were at a ground level, and they're pretty high up in the hierarchy now, which is really great. So we wouldn't say we were the predecessor to Substack, but we're kicking around in a similar realm for sure.
In 2016, like, in my world, Substack only came into its own a few years ago, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I wasn't aware of it. I'm sure it was flying, but I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah. Well, I think when did Substack come into its own? Do you know what it was? It was when people started defecting. I think Barry Weiss was really useful to the platform, because you started getting these really high-ranking journalists. Their resignation letter from, say, New York Times or Washington Post was their first Substack post, and then there was so much, like, energy against the regime and their propaganda machines that people would back these people and fund them. And so, for anyone who doesn't know, Substack is a subscription model for writers, for journalists, and so
I just
um,
I just looked it up, and you were kicking around. I think it was called Letter Wiki 2016, and Substack was founded 2017. And you're right, Barry Weiss was the kind of the line in the sand. That came the kind of the era of
it
the
was a big one.
of the public withdrawals of saying this isn't good enough, this isn't journalism,
Yeah.
this isn't why I became a journalist. Michael
Yes.
Schellenberger, I think, is a brilliant example of
great
how
one.
to use Substack.
Great
Yeah.
one. Yeah. He's a kind of a journalist from another era, and I guess he's just doing journalism. And that looks so strange now that you're like, this is a new thing, and it's like he's just like, I just called the guys and knocked on some doors, and then I wrote about it, and it's like, oh wow, I thought this was like this is some breakthrough form that you've created. It's amazing. It's like just standard journalism.
Yeah. But that's what we need. I find it amazing that journalists don't see that if they follow the kind of the standards, the principles of journalism, they're sitting on the biggest stories of their lifetime, and they
So
could
exciting.
explore them because people like us are so keen to speak.
Yeah. It's the business models are all screwy. So it's like you're
Yeah.
It's too, because there are some big winners like Schellenberger, but someone who's not as, how would you say, adept at, because people like Schellenberger and Barry Weiss are very, very knowledgeable about, the zeitgeist and, how to hit it and where the stories are and where we are in the world. Your average journalist is just, from my experience in the newsroom, it's they turn up, they get there, the editor tells them what to write about, they go and write about it. And so if they're stuck in some ideological mess, they're not able to see their way out of it. And so a lot of these people are just trying to progress their careers. And then to think about like Barry Weiss and all these people who are really great at it, they're unicorns because they're business people as well as journalists, as well as understanding the social situation, and so it's not a situation where your everyday journalist can just go do that. I think a lot of people would have tried as well and then failed, and then now they're accountants or something. But it's just or they're working at Bunnings.
Well, yeah, I've done both. Like I was a reporter for the Post Millennial, so
Great.
but we were functioning on clicks. It's advertising revenue, and you absolutely had to get the clicks, and that's what most mainstream journalism is.
Yeah.
And then I went to work for Michael Schellenberger, so I did the
cool.
other style journalism where it was not clicks. We had subscriptions, and we could dig into a story and really report and take our time.
Amazing.
And so it is the clicks, though. It's all about, like, even CBC, which is somehow funded by the federal government and still behaves like it needs the clicks. You're not digging in if you need to, like, publish really, really fast, and you need to publish the ideological slant that your outlet has.
That's true. The business model, because before I got into all this, I was working in the technical roles inside a news bureau, so camera editing. It's pretty straightforward stuff, and so once you got the technical stuff down, you can actually just observe the news gathering process. And so that was a really interesting time to be in a newsroom, because that was when the internet was just coming. And so what you had was this old guard journalist that was just doing the work of Michael Schellenberger or these guys who were just actually investigating. They were leaving their desks, which is something that just doesn't just stop happening. And then you had this new kind of Mean Girls journalism of the younger cohort. I'm an older millennial, so it kind of starts with people that were my age, maybe a little bit older. And they were just doing a different kind of journalism. It was ideologically set, and so they just looked at the world through a template, and that's how they found their editorial angles. A lot of the editorial angles were getting fed to them from the top, but even within the story, so you get told what to look at, and then you choose which details to uncover. There was actually a really interesting experience very early on when I was just learning the camera, and I was there with another cameraman. And this was when, in Australia, the big story was Indian students were apparently getting bashed on public transport in these kind of racial incidents, which is probably the genesis for the viral video that I made. But anyway, so this was a really big story, and we went out and we shot with a witness, and Jono asked them all these questions, and then toward the end of the interview, the witness said they bashed another guy though, like down the street, and then she was going, "Oh, was he Indian?" And she goes, "No, he's white." And she was like, "All right." She didn't really chase the lead, and so she was feeding this. It ends up in the bulletin because you're forced to. But it was like an Indian student got bashed on the train, and then another guy got hit a little bit down the thing. It's just like it's like heightening the ideological version of it. And so that was my first taste of hang on a sec, the things that happen in the world as they get filtered through the news gathering process, they come out looking very, very different. And then that got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then when the younger people came in, they didn't even leave their desks. So they were actually just finding the facts, cherry picking the facts that fit their theoretical worldview, and then just fed them to the people. And so your population becomes completely deranged because they start looking at the world the way that you're feeding them, and they think it's that's the way it's all working. It's a very propagandistic place we ended up in.
Yeah, like I'm in Canada speaking on the gender issue, and it's truly incredible because the mainstream media has just one approach to this. They don't dig into it. They don't report anything even remotely close to the full story, and it makes my task impossible because the people that I'm trying to reach only read the mainstream media, and
so hard.
they because the story is so completely crazy, the truth is so completely insane that they think I'm mad. They think I've gone into conspiracy land and what I'm saying can't possibly be true, because they're only getting this very ideological slant from CBC, CTV, all the rest of them.
It's like even family members for me who don't really understand what I'm doing. It's a really kind of heartbreaking time to live in, because we're so fragmented. And when you're in the room and talking with someone, you've got to like track their sources. Does that make sense? And then speak accordingly. It's not. There's a lack of freedom. It's like where's your source? And then someone will tell you their sources is one of your sources. And you're like, oh, thank God. And then you kind of get into it. But for the most part, you're tiptoeing around socially. It's very, very, very strange time.
It is a very strange time, and I agree. Tracking the sources while you're in the room it's so new. Like having kind of had ordinary discourse for decades, and suddenly find that I'm in some sort of Soviet regime that is kind of masked with smiles, and it's not happening, but it is. It's very unnerving. And sadly, I think we're creating our own echo chambers, because then I leave the mainstream media. I use my own media, which is my own self-created echo chamber. So it's got a big flaw in the response. But I wonder, where do you think we are now? Because many people think with America, with Trump, with the executive orders, things are breaking through. I know Australia is I know a lot about Australia, because I've worked so often with parents from Australia, and there's some heartbreaking stories with trans in Australia. But how do you think things are in general with the zeitgeist? Because you're probably in the right place at the right time.
Being in Australia is not being in the right place at the right time. I think Australia is like one of the most pure managerial regimes there is. I think there's a long way to get anywhere here. It's like Canada. Like where I don't know what it is. It's something like maybe our history isn't strong enough, or our industries. It's something. It's maybe it's something to do with abundance of resources or something, the resource curse thing, where you just become extremely managerial. I know that in Australia, we're very focused on kind of our management layers because we're isolated. And so we've become this very reliant on our government to get us everything. And so ideologically, once the state is captured, then where do you go? Because we don't have much industry. And in America, there's industry everywhere. There's money flowing everywhere. And so there's a lot of innovation, and even ideological innovation. So that seems like the right place, even though it's going wild. But I think I feel a bit trapped here in Australia. I can't. I've been starting to network, because I've been overseas in UK and the US, and I got married recently, and we've got a house, and so we're kind of settling down here. And now I'm networking and kind of climbing the walls a little bit, because I've been a bit of a nomad my whole life, and now I'm like, oh shit, I'm here, and it's pretty backward. It's like I don't see any kind of breakthrough happening.
But you, to me, like what I'm getting from this conversation is you are the Forrest Gump of the culture war. You have
oh man, Forrest
in
Gump
the
of
nicest possible way.
Yes, okay,
you've been there. You've tracked every step of the way. You've been in the right place at the right time, and you've tracked every step of the way. But do you feel like, I feel it at the moment that there's been, even in Canada, it hasn't really hit Canada, but I still feel it, that there's a huge shift right now. Woke is on its way out. And I feel perhaps something a little bit scary might be on the rise. I know James Lindsay is calling it the woke right, or this pendulum swing. Do you feel that there's a pendulum swing?
how do I explain this? Because I've got like a really like overarching theory of what's taking place, and I think it's like the Protestant Reformation and the printing press. The printing press came in. You've got this structure. Like, which is the Catholic Church, and
Yeah.
they became pretty degenerate before, when the printing press came in. So there was genuine critique that was supposed to come their way. And then, so in terms of ideological distribution, you go to church every Sunday. You've got a priest there. He's connected to the higher ups. The higher ups connected to God. You're getting God. You've got your direction. You've got your word of God. So you bend a knee to the guy in the pulpit. And they're directing the rhythms of life and everything like that. Then printing press comes along. You've got all these kind of wily, a lot of them theologians. They were actually part of the structure. So they start printing and they start having a different understanding, and they start critiquing the power, the power institution who's in control of the way that people think about things. Before that, the Bible was in Latin. There's a lot of like extra details in this, and then so they translate the Bible. They give it to the people. The people start looking at the God's word, and they're like, "Hang on a sec, these middlemen are full of shit. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do it this way." But we're talking about just years and years of wars, like decades of wars, and Germany, like Central Europe, lost 40% of its population. We're talking like wild stuff that took place. From that, you get this. I'm covering a lot of ground, but I'll do it quickly. From that, you get so this is
Martin Luther kind of exposed it all, the degeneracy of the Catholic Church, and as a result, Protestantism came about, and it was needed. It was absolutely corrupt, but it was all, as you say, it was all because the printing press, suddenly they could see what was written in the Bible, and there was nothing about all the extortion that the bishops were doing on the ordinary people. Extortion, tithes, and things like that.
Yeah, and I think the Pope had a baby, and this is like a illegitimate baby.
A lot more than having babies. It was
exactly.
pretty awful.
Yeah, and that was selling tickets to heaven, just doing all sorts of like really out there stuff. But anyway, so in the Protestant Reformation, you've got these like major denominations, and they're the ones who interpret God's will in their own way. But you've also got a lot of madness under there. You got like the Anabaptists in Munster who are like who are becoming like mini cults. And so you've got like this proliferation of people interpreting the will of God in their own way and living the way that they want to live. So then we get from there, I think they were sick of, there's a lot of theories around this, but they were sick of fighting. And so they're like, well, let's give up God's will, and then like let's figure out what we can agree on, which is material reality, the market value of empirical reality goes up. And then you get the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution. Then, so if we're looking at our structure now, the institutions that were once mediating the Word of God, they mediate objective reality now. And so now we've got things like the university is quite church-like because it's got the experts who are interpreting reality for you, and then you've got their distribution networks, which is the media, which is like the church, the priests telling you how things are. And I think that's something similar. History never repeats, it rhymes, but this has got a certain cadence to it. I think that the internet comes along, and all of a sudden you've got people, rogue academics who are part of the system. Yeah, Martin Luther's. And Elon Musk might be a kind of a Henry VIII character, right? He created the Church of England, like by taking Twitter. He's like taking a whole chunk and creating a new denomination. And so we've also got the Anabaptist of Munsters, who is like Pizzagate guys. And so there's all these denominations of material reality, of truth. So the truth denominations that are popping up, and we're all living in one, and we're all like interpreting reality in our own ways. And so and that's kind of how I see it, and that's why we're fragmenting into these little information Protestant denominations.
Goodness me, that was brilliant.
Yeah, fascinating. Do you think we're coming to the end of, the age of the Enlightenment? Is it some sort of post-Enlightenment age?
Oh yeah,
This is.
that was a big setup for what I actually think is going on. So I think so the woke right. So what you've got with these kind of denominations, you've got the kind of left wing one, which are the woke people who completely reject establishment. They reject science. They reject the establishment way of looking at things, and so they've been incorporated in the establishment. So it's kind of a weird thing that's going on. But if you look at where they came from, these are people who don't respect scientific truths that are coming from the establishment, and they've created their own completely out personalized ideological worldview. And so yeah, it is strange that that's been absorbed into the power structure, because it is what it is. They took it over. They were one of the powerful denominations that took it over. With the right, there's a kind of mirror who's completely rejecting what they call as the post-war consensus, and it's another large denomination. So I understand why they've been called woke. I'm a little more, having studied woke for so long, I'm a little more open to their analysis. I think that there's more truth there. I think that they have they're on they understand what time it is, and I don't think they're prescriptive worlds. I don't know where I am on that, but their descriptive world is closer to reality than the woke one. And so I think that this is a large denomination that is trying to reinterpret the world that we all grew up in. And so, but I also don't think that that's avoidable now. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't think we can live in the end of history kind of 90s land. I think that it doesn't have the technological base. I think that the mass media infrastructure was something that worldview required, and it's not there now. And so this is very strange, because I've said this for like 10 years now or something like that. Like I remember having a conversation with someone going, shit, everything's getting wild. And I'm like, we should actually be really happy. This was before COVID. And I was like, no, this is actually really good considering the technological things that are going on. Like, we're actually really safe and sound right now. And then they were like, oh, that's so crazy. And then it's just gotten crazier and crazier and crazier. And so I expect that trend will continue, because it's having, like, we're entering this multipolar thing. All the big powers overseas are getting involved in this propaganda game. It's really hard to figure out what's true, which way's up. The people on the side of science are confused and becoming increasingly ideological. The universities have more or less been taken over. There's a big cleanup job afoot with the Trump administration, but this is why I'm sympathetic to Trump administration, because I'm like, things were very, very dire, and something big needed to happen.
Yeah.
There's a lot here, and I might be rambling, but yeah.
So, are you positive about the next stage, or?
I'm positive from a filmmaker's perspective, because I love wild stuff. It's a very, very interesting time to be a filmmaker. But things like, I don't know where to put my money. It's like the market's turned to a roulette table all of a sudden. So if you're interested in stability, you probably wouldn't be very happy right now. But if you're interested in interesting things, then yeah.
Okay.
It often reminds me of 1918, 1919, there was the flu, the Spanish flu, and it killed so many million. And then came the 20s, the roaring 20s, and then came the bus. It feels like the 2020s are similarly kind of unconstrained chaos. And we're not dancing, and we don't have flappers or the fabulous outfits, but there does feel a feel of kind of hysteria and kind of madness that anything could happen.
Mm.
Great Gatsby and the dance floor turned into a swimming pool, and
Yeah.
it feels a
Yeah.
little bit like that. There's a
Yeah.
feeling of chaos. We're coming towards the end. I'd love to know what you're working on at the moment, and also if there's anything you'd like to recommend our viewers, or any podcasts, films, books that you're reading that you think people might be interested in.
I think that there's an interesting writer is a guy named N.S. Lyons. He just released something. I think it was called the American Strong Gods. He's taken the book of R.R. Reno, and he's written up this beautiful, what would you call it, 60,000-foot perspective. I've been reading a lot of his work recently, and I think that his just based on what you said about it feeling like the 20s, he's just released something and tweaked something in my mind, because you will love this piece if that's the way you're feeling. It'll justify that feeling for you, I think. Who else am I reading? Quite a lot now, but maybe nothing that I would suggest. I'm working on my Substack at the moment, and right now I've got a few strange things I'm working on quietly that I don't even know how to describe. So I'll there will be a time. There will be a time. I feel like they're exciting things, but they're not coherent just yet. So yeah, I'm doing writing now, because I wasn't much of a writer, and then I got locked in my house for 2 years because I was in Victoria during COVID, and so I had to do something. And so I've gotten into writing, and I'm putting some of these ideas in text, so they're not just rambling and turn up in weird films. So that's what I'm working on. My Substack is probably the best place to get me right now.
Oh, thank you so much. That was really fascinating. Michael Nayna, so that's how you find you on Substack. I'm definitely going to follow you if I don't already. Thanks. You're brilliant. Really fascinating work you do.
Yes,
thanks, guys.
Thank you.
It's fun.
Thanks.